Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Hey, what's going on, family? This is Side for No Picks Podcast.
Hey, good evening, family. Joe checking in, No Picks Podcast.
All right, so check it out, family. Today, we're addressing some comments that were made on the comedian Jeffrey's podcast. Basically, him and his guests were talking about a historic comment from former President Lyndon B. Johnson, and it was interesting. So I want to play the clip that they play the clip and have a conversation about it. All right,
let's do it.
Want to convince the lowest white man he's better than the best
Lyndon B. Johnson.
His quote is, if you want to convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you.
Damn. Lyndon B. Johnson.
His quote.
Interesting. And for the fact that it came from Lyndon B. Johnson was interesting too.
Right.
Because he was one of the ones who was texting like corporations at like 70, 80%, you know what I mean? He was the one that kept winning the elections and they had to change the term limits because he just kept winning. So like it's interesting that this is the quote coming from him.
Right.
But yeah, any questions to set it up or like initial thoughts?
Set it up. So my question to you, Joe, is this whole concept of what let's keep it to America, right? This whole concept of what America see as racism. Is it more classism than racism?
Is it more classism than racism? So, I think, well, it's the thing is it's both. And we've talked about this before, and I know that sounds like a political answer, but I'm going to say it's definitely both. The only thing is racism or race is used as, and I've said this before, is instrumental, right? So race is used as a tool to kind of divide people, to make one person or one group of people feel superior to another. That way you're okay with like either dehumanizing or mass incarcerating or vilifying or using a certain community as a scapegoat. Like when you make a certain racial demographic a target for something, it's just easier to either paint them as the villains or just voice all your frustration towards them. So I think it's both, right? I definitely think that at this day and age, classism is the biggest issue. And I've said this before, classism for me is even greater than racism. The problem is racism is used by the wealthy and the elite and those who are in power to polarize the masses. Right. Because I do believe that us, we have more in common than we have different. Genetically, DNA wise, there's more in common with us. Some of us just have a little more melanin than others, but we're pretty much almost identical. And race, I do think, is this social construct that was created to kind of divide people, to keep them separated. So that's my initial thought, is that I think it's both. Definitely classism for me has now become the bigger issue, but racism is used to keep that classist agenda like there and keep us divided. That's my initial thought.
So my thing is, you know how I feel. Like I've always thought it was more classism than racism. Like the two can be intertwined, right? But I think it originates from wealthy people, like wealthy white people, right? So back, like let's think it back in the day. It originates from wealthy white people looking for a way to hold on to power. So it benefits them to put those in power against those new people that they want to castigate to be like a threat to their reign, right? So, for example, before, let's say, there were periods where, when the Italians came over in America, there were, white Anglo-Saxons looked down at the Italians and was like, yo, y'all not like us.
Italians, Irish.
Right. It can go on and on. The Chinese.
Yeah.
That like every single group that wasn't like white Anglo-Saxon from England, they always gave them shit because that group always gave them shit because they're like, listen, you're a group that we could unify against.
Right.
Right. So it's like, so you bring black people over, you bring Africans over, you bring other dark-skinned people over. And it's like, okay, cool. Now white people care less about the nuances of Italian, Irish, Anglo-Saxon, like all these other things. Now they're like, listen, we're all white, and these people have darker skin than us. So this is a difference that we can be together, and we can look at them and say, hey, you know what? You guys are different than us. We're all together. You guys are the enemy, and they were less in number, so they can say, hey, you know what? You're like, we have a common goal. Hating you is our common goal. Mm-hmm. So, and I've always thought that it's like the only thing that I think the only like is I think it's human nature to kind of separate ourselves. It happens in our community. It happens in the black community. Light skin versus black skin versus dark skin. Like we look at each other like, okay, well, light skinned people like, okay, well, dark skinned people think light skinned people think they're better than them. So dark skinned people don't like light skinned people. And the same is reversed. It's like, okay, cool. I met a lot of friends. Like I knew a lot of people growing up and was like, okay, cool. I don't like dark skinned people because dark skinned people don't like light skinned people. And then we're all black, but it's still a way for us to divide ourselves and
Of course,
find a smaller clan. Take my neighborhood for example. I'm from Philly. I'm from Germantown specifically, right?
Right.
Within Germantown, and I'm sure it's the same within every hood, right? But like within Philly, within Germantown, we're all black. Some of us are light skinned, some of us are dark skinned, some of us are lighter skinned than that, right? But or darker skinned than that. But we separate ourselves based off what block we're from. So I'm from Seymour Street. So the people from Seymour Street will be against the people from Haynes Street. And the people from Haynes Street will be against the people from Pulaski Ave. The people from Pulaski Ave will be against the people from Hansberry.
Right.
So it's like it's human nature to try to divide ourselves. I personally think the only way we can come together as one unified group, regardless of color, is if an external threat comes, like say, i.e., aliens, right? Like, aliens come, you'll see white people, you'll see black people, you'll see all the people on the spectrum coming. Like for example, when 9/11 happened, white people and black people were on the same page for a while. Like you get on a plane, you're a black dude, you look at the white dude, but when you see an Arab dude come, you like y'all look at y'all glance at each other like, listen,
right.
We may not have historically liked each other, but we on his ass.
Right. So great points, right? So absolutely great point. And that point about 9/11 and Muslims or melanated Arabs. So I'll say, to touch back to the main point, which is that if you convince a white man, right, the quote from Lyndon B. Johnson that he is better off than say superior in some way than a black man, then he will be okay. Then he won't care if you pick his pockets, right? So what Lyndon B. Johnson was saying is that if you convince the white man, the average white man, not the whole, but the average white man, that he is in some way superior to the black man,
right,
then he won't care if you're stealing money from him off the top or through his wages or some way, if you're exploiting him for his labor to make money off of him. He does not care because he has this special star or this badge that says I'm better than Blackie. And so because of that, I will be okay in my place because in his mind, he's convinced that he's superior and that there is something beneath him, right? So I want to stick to that energy too, because when we look at the case of 9/11, we can use that too. So 9/11, I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on. I don't want to get suspended again. We got banned a few times for talking about certain topics, so I'm trying to tread lightly. But in that situation, there are people who do believe that 9/11 was in fact an inside job. When we think about the pages of the 9/11 Commission report that were kind of redacted and taken away from the public eye, and then were released, and we found out that we knew that there were Arabs that we were working with, Saudi Arabian people that we were working with, and we had met with, and we were keeping tabs on, who were linked to the explosions. When we hear about Building 7, 9/11 Building 7, Building 7 went down too with the trade towers. No one questioned it. So there was this whole idea of like someone's profiting off of this attack. Some people said maybe it was a false flag, right? But now that we know that they released the letter to Osama bin Laden, there was that letter to America. Remember that it went viral on TikTok for a while. They took it off because this was at the height of the Israel-Gaza conflict. And what Osama bin Laden was saying is like, the reason we're attacking America is because of what you guys have done to support Israel in the treatment of the Gazans, of the Palestinian people, what you've done to the Arab nations. Like, it was in complete retaliation to our meddling in the Middle East, right? But somebody's getting rich off of this. So it's easy to just paint it and put it as a false flag, blame it on Arabs, blame it on Muslims, get people fired up, and people are like, damn Muslims, damn Arabs, get all these Iraqis out of here, these terrorists, paint them as the villains. But meanwhile, while we're fighting and pointing the fingers at people who had nothing to do with it, the people who are creating these wars, the people who might be responsible for an inside job or the false flag, the people who are benefiting this are the people who are the weapon contracts, the Lockheed Martins, the people who are in military industrial complex, the people who are owning these banks. Because when 9/11 happened, the price of gold, Trump himself asked, what's the price of gold? Because when that attack hit, people knew war was about to start. So the war machine gets paid. So while we're fighting and pointing the fingers and creating these like boogeymen in our minds, there are people who are up top calling all of these shots, orchestrating all of these events, who get paid off of it. And so once
Yeah.
again, that's one way that it's that spirit of that message that Lyndon B. Johnson said, which is like, if you convince us that we're better than another group of people, then they're okay with you stealing from us or exploiting us or using our tax dollars to wage wars and kill innocent lives, because we're so mad at this other person that we vilified now, this
Right.
boogeyman.
But let's stay
You know
away
what I'm
from
saying?
let's stay away from the conspiracies though, because that got us in trouble.
Okay, yeah. All right. So that's one example, but I want to keep that spirit of that energy because we talked about this before, where we're like, listen, this is an old tactic, though, bro. Like what Lyndon B. Johnson is talking about. This is divide and conquer. We've talked about this before. We're like, even on the plantation years ago. I know Americans hate talking about slavery and our history of slavery. You can't ignore it. This shit is here. This country was built off the back of that. You know what I mean? Like it started with the genocide of the Native Americans. It came with bringing the indentured, the indentured servants, which were a mix of white and Asians, but mostly these African slaves. Our history is intertwined with racism, right? We can't just forget about the shit. But even back then, the plantation owners, the slave owners knew that they saw that some of the white indentured servants were getting close to the black folk, to the slaves. They were becoming friends. They were eating with each other. They were joining each other. They were singing songs, and like they started socializing. They realized the poor people had more in common. Remember, we talked about class. The poor people have more in common. Remember, I told you I have more in common with a poor white man than I do with a rich white man? It's class. So what the people
Rich black man.
I have more in common with a poor white man than I do with a rich black man.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Sorry. So it's this idea that class is a thing, right? But they started noticing that the average workers, the slaves and the indentured servants and the poor whites who were there working, who didn't have that much power, they were befriending the black folk. You know what I'm saying? So they started getting scared because they're like, yo, there's too much power. There are way more of them. Just like I always say, there are way more average American workers than there are billionaires, owners of corporations. They need us. We have power in numbers, so they notice we can't let the poor whites and the poor blacks unify. We
Right.
can't let them find common ground. So how do we divide them? Okay, white people are better. That's when you start using race. No, you can't do that. No, you're better than them. They're beasts. They're savages. You're better than them. Here, we're going to give you some land. We're going to give you some privileges. We're going to put you on a slave patrol. Now, if the blackies start running off, now you can go find them. Good job. I'm going to give you this, or we're going to give you your own slave. You get privileges for playing into the system. So this is how they use race to divide us and keep the same economic structure in place.
Right.
That's that same energy that Godfrey, well, not Godfrey, but the quote from Lyndon B. Johnson. It's an old tactic, bro.
Right.
You read the what is it, the 48 laws of power? They tell you divide and conquer. It's one of the laws of power, bro. If you want to control a population, divide them.
Right.
Make them fight against each other. Create differences. Exploit those differences.
Right.
Like that's all it is, bro. That's what it is.
Right.
Yeah, man. Like what
I
else you got?
I mean, listen, we can go on about this forever, but this should be one of the ones that we started a bigger conversation. And
I want that.
Yeah. Listen. Tell us what y'all think, family. Like, comment, subscribe, and listen. Let's start a conversation about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Until next time, y'all. Y'all stay safe.